Welcome back to our journey through Genesis. Last time, we saw God give Noah some very specific, life-saving instructions. Today, in chapter 7, we witness the moment everything changes. The countdown is over, and the rains are about to begin. Let's dive in. The chapter opens with a final, direct command from the Lord to Noah: "Go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation." This is such a powerful statement. Amidst a world that had turned its back on its creator, one family stood out. It wasn't about being perfect, but about having a heart that was turned towards God. This righteousness, this right relationship with God, was their ticket to safety. Then, God refines the instructions for the animals. Remember the 2 of every kind? Now, God specifies something new. He tells Noah to take 7 pairs, male and female, of every kind of clean animal, and only 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal. He also instructs him to take 7 pairs of every kind of bird. Why the difference? The clean animals would be crucial after the flood. They would be used for sacrifices to worship God, and eventually, for food. The extra pairs ensured their species would thrive and that there would be enough for these important purposes. It's a beautiful example of God's foresight, planning not just for the survival during the flood, but for life after it. He's always thinking ahead for his people. God then gives a final, chilling 7-day warning. 7 days from now I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made. Can you imagine the intensity of those last 7 days? The final preparations, the last goodbyes to the world they knew. For everyone else, it was just another week. They were likely eating, drinking, and living life as usual, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. But for Noah and his family, every hour was a step closer to the inevitable. The scripture simply says, "And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him." His obedience is steadfast, a constant theme in his story. No questions, no hesitation. Just trust and action. The Bible gives us Noah's age at this momentous point. He was 600 years old when the floodwaters came. Think about that. He may have spent up to a century building this ark, enduring ridicule and skepticism from his neighbors. His entire life had been building towards this one event. And now, the time had come. So, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, along with his wife and his sons' wives, all entered the ark. They weren't alone. Just as God commanded, pairs of all living creatures, clean and unclean animals, birds, and every creature that moves along the ground, came to Noah and entered the ark. This wasn't a chaotic stampede. The text implies an orderly procession, as if the animals themselves were being guided by a divine hand. It's a stunning picture, this floating zoo, a sanctuary for all life, being populated according to God's perfect plan. The animals came to Noah. He didn't have to go out and hunt them down. God brought them. When God gives a command, He also provides the means to fulfill it. Then, the 7-day countdown ends. The narrative gets incredibly specific here. In the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the 2nd month, on that very day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. This wasn't just a heavy rainstorm. The language used is cataclysmic. The springs of the great deep burst forth suggests massive geological upheaval, underwater volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, water rushing up from beneath the earth's crust. At the same time, the floodgates of the heavens were opened, indicating a torrential, unrelenting downpour from above. It was a decreation, a return to the watery chaos described in the very beginning of Genesis, before God separated the waters. The rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. This number, 40, appears frequently in the Bible, often representing a period of testing, trial, and transformation. And this was the ultimate trial for the earth. On the very day the flood began, the Bible reiterates that Noah's family and the animals were safely inside the ark. And then, a crucial detail, then the Lord shut him in. This is so significant. Noah didn't close the door himself. God did. It was an act of both protection and finality. Once that door was shut by God, no one else could get in, and nothing could harm those inside. They were sealed in God's care, completely dependent on Him for what was to come. As the waters rose, the ark began to float. It was lifted high above the earth, a solitary vessel of hope on a sea of judgment. The water level kept rising, covering everything. The text emphasizes the totality of the destruction. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits. That's over 22 feet. Even the highest peaks were submerged. There was no escape. No high ground to run to. The consequences were absolute. Every living thing that moved on land perished: birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind. Everything that had the breath of life in its nostrils, everything on dry land, died. It's a somber and sobering passage. The slate was being wiped clean. The world that had become so corrupt was washed away. The only survivors were Noah and those with him in the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. That's 5 months. The 40 days of rain were just the beginning of the event. For 5 long months, water covered the entire planet. Noah and his family were adrift, surrounded by a silent, watery world, waiting on God. Their story shifts from one of building and preparation to one of patience and endurance. They had done their part, and now they had to trust that the same God who shut them in would eventually bring them out. Genesis chapter 7 is a powerful, dramatic, and difficult chapter. It shows us the severity of sin and the reality of God's judgment. But it also paints an unforgettable picture of God's grace and salvation. In the midst of universal destruction, God made a way of escape for those who trusted Him. Noah's Ark is a symbol of that salvation, a refuge provided by God Himself. It reminds us that even when it feels like the world is falling apart, God has a plan to preserve His people. He is faithful to His promises and He is our ultimate protector. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive into Genesis 7. It's a heavy chapter, but it's essential to understanding the biblical narrative. Join me next time as we see what happens next. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you then.